So I've been away for a week. I have got baby snot on me, and gold has still maintained its run. Now, I know everyone calls it a safe haven and an amazing investment now because at the top, which is probably the whole premise of this video in terms of, well, where the frick does that money go? I am bullish on Bitcoin. I do believe stacking the sats is kind of important for the long term and the longevity of, inflation and certain metrics that I'm going to talk about, debt. But you get the idea. So with CPI data announcing tomorrow, we also have to look at the fact that we do have an interest rate decision in a couple of days as well. But we do need to break down market fatigue for gold. We do need to talk about timing window for Q4 into are we going to get a bit of a Bitcoin flurry and why the altcoin market, even still in this sort of time period, still looks a bit dead. If you enjoy this content, please do slap a like, comment, and subscribe. It means an awful lot. Gold looks pretty heavy, and it is, and it kind of makes sense in a way. It's been on a parabolic run, and we've got to talk about how it's been flying. It's been driven by central bank demand. It's been, every single retailer's kind of trip to the outside of, I want to go to the bullion vault and buy some gold for the first time ever. But that sentiment could quite quickly flip, and when it does flip, you're probably going to start noticing that people that ignored it for a long time are going to get smashed by it. We've seen that before in crypto retail booms in the past with altcoins and Bitcoin, right? But you got to look at the fact of where this is and why it's so important. And you can argue many different things about the technicals about this, but it's just overbought situations and market parabolic. It is going to come down, and it has printed out a 90.66 on the 3-day time frame on the RSI. On the weekly as well, it is like 84s. The highest it's been, I can imagine, since 2019 in terms of that pump there. And that was quite a big pump back in the day. So there's a lot of situations here, but again, you just zoom out and you look at it, wow, that weekly time frame. And yeah, if it does cool off, we may look at rotation where the logical representative investment could actually be Bitcoin, which I know for you boomers and certain people out there who have a negative opinion, like what's his face, can't remember his name now, Tucker, has claimed that the CIA built Bitcoin, which I think is a bit mental considering that's just, strange. But moving on, this is a mental move. And I know for some people, oh my God, it's only 4,000. Yes, you could always go up. But the thing with gold is, it is just sentiment based. It is. It's gold. We all know what gold is. People have suddenly rushed to buy it, and there's a reason for that. And now more and more people want to buy it, which has then made the price go up. If you reverse engineer that and just remove the fact that gold is heavy and you need a lot of muscles to move it versus, say, Bitcoin with its computation power and what it means, they are very, very similar, just in very different formats. So yeah. Now, let's talk about the CPI, the Fed, the macro, whatever. Ultimately, right, the Bitcoin market is very much governed by institution, the same way as which you could argue gold is, obviously. Now, we've had a bit of a wishy-washy couple of weeks. It's not been great. It's not been, apart from the 6th of October, where you can see at the top there, really, really strong into a bit of wobbliness. That's fine. But let's be honest, we do need to look at the CPI meetings and, the Federal Reserve meetings. So obviously we've got CPI tomorrow. What will be said? Yeah. We've also got this, which is on the screen, which is there's a very, very strong case we're going to get a rate cut, which we kind of expected. It's kind of already priced in. And yeah, these sort of things will matter. And you could argue, yes, CPI will probably more likely rise up into 3% tomorrow. That's fine. So yeah, there's a bit of pressure there. And obviously, with inflation going up, this is an interesting point for obviously an argument for Bitcoin, obviously. But as you can imagine, this is just a macro window. It's just going to kind of decide where the money rotates potentially next. And if gold is rotating the wrong way and it's going to sell off, and we all know that market tops with euphoria, not weakness and fear. I don't think, personally, the Bitcoin tops in yet. That's my personal opinion, okay? Whether you agree or not, it's not financial advice. That's just what I think. Whether that becomes a false dawn or not, I don't know. But at the end of the day, it could really be an interesting point in the next couple of weeks. But let's talk about this. The US debt. The US debt. The US debt. It keeps on rising every single month, right? Okay. And then you could talk about, well, why is people buying Bitcoin? Why are people buying gold? Why are people still piling into the stock market, the AI stocks, whatever it may be? It's because cash is still very much trash. And that hasn't really changed for a long, long time. We've always had that kind of opinion, which I get it, I understand it, where people don't quite get it. You want to save your money. But at the end of the day, there's a reason why the Bitcoin market's doing okay versus the likes of, say, certain types of other markets, right? You could argue why gold is doing well. And as you can imagine, it's just one of those situations. But again, we talk about something else. Mr. Trump here is going to be announcing something at 3 p.m. I don't know what that is. That could wobble the market. And that's the one thing I dislike about this administration is the fact that we get more market wobbles. It doesn't really work very well in a certain situation. So we could talk about that. But let's talk about Bitcoin. Because Bitcoin hasn't had the greatest of, well, let's be honest, it hasn't had the greatest of 2025. It's been very, very range bound. Structurally, it's kind of okay in a way. The monthly time frame looks very, it looks like my 6-year-old down a sweet aisle in Tesco's, but you get the point. It's very indecisive. This could be a very much structural bottom, potentially, who knows? But again, going down to the daily time frame, it's not terrible. It's still in, you could argue, this range. It has rejected certain EMAs, which I get, but it could quite easily just fly off from here and retest that level. That is, for me, $116,000, $117,000 is the perfect level. But that BTC to gold ratio is still hugging that kind of situation of an uptrend where it's still pretty much dominant. Bitcoin outperforms most things across the board with its growth. It is a very risky, speculative asset. That's fine. But as you can imagine, if CPI gets better, if the Federal Reserve decides to pivot into QE from QT, for example, or certain situations do happen with monetary policy, it might just set up the most mental move of the last, couple of years. Potentially, yes. Well, I do want to talk about the fact of the false narrative that we can get spun here. Too many people just want to become rich, and I get it. We all do, right? But you've got to also be okay with being average, and stuff like this really gets on my tits, how Bitcoin will be worth 13 million in 2045. How do you know? You don't know, do you? You could be blown off course at any point, as I say. The growth target and the growth estimations of Bitcoin, yeah, in the past has been great, but over the course of the last 6 months hasn't been great at all. You're going to have periods where it will not grow for a while. Look at gold, for example. We had 4 years of nought in gold, and now look all of a sudden, right? So that's a huge problem that we could find ourselves in, right? Because people forget being average is fine. As long as you're outperforming most people, don't worry about other people. Don't copy other people's homework. Just worry on yourself. And I think more often than not, we look at gold. Oh my God, why is everyone pivoting to gold? Even Bitcoin maxis were talking about gold. Like, why? Why are you now selling your Bitcoin for gold? What are you doing? You're an idiot. Literally defining yourself as a laugh. I don't hold any gold, but I look at it to see where we are. But the reality is here, right? This is a situation. People are still forgetting about Bitcoin, realistically. But when we talk about Bitcoin, we've got to talk about all the risks of the altcoins. And the altcoin market, in my viewpoint, is still very much a mess. Bitcoin dominance is still growing. Now, I have the same argument as Ben Cohen here, that there isn't enough butter for the toast. Let's be honest. There's too many altcoins. Now, I made a post on one of his comments on X about alt seasons and altcoins, and I know you're probably bored of me talking about it, but 2017, we had like 500 altcoins, pretty much. 2021 probably had about 5,000, 7,000 that you probably would look at. Now we're between 5 and 21 million. There's a lot, right? And that becomes a bit of an issue. With that, we've still got high dominance, and that hasn't changed. Even though we've dropped a lot, we are still rising up. We could still be comfortable in the 60% area. Altcoins right now is too much leverage, not enough retail, not enough money flowing into it because it's all going into Bitcoin or maybe the odd select altcoin or mainly, you could argue, stable currency, right? So that becomes a bit of an issue. When we talk about where does the money rotate from with gold, more often than not, it's not going to go into your altcoin. It's going to probably go into, say, your Bitcoin, which, again, whether you like it or not, is kind of the reality of it. But it's made it very, very hard to trade. And as I much, like to talk about, if you're going to be in the market with altcoins, there is some good trading opportunities out there. But realistically, it's been very, very hard. But I also think too many people use too much leverage and not understand what they're getting into. By the way, if you're in the UK and you do want to do some futures, it is risky. Don't use high leverage, but Blowfin is open. I get asked this question all the time. Why can I not trade in the UK? You can on Blowfin. There's plenty of other exchanges out there. You just got to find them. But as I say, with that, it's always one step forward, 6 steps back with altcoins, because we always get a certain situation where things do look pretty rosy, as I've alluded to before, with the likes of stable currency dominances and stuff like that, which is fine. But yeah, we're rising right now, right? Realistically, what the situation is, what needs to happen is these need to go lower. It isn't going lower right now because a lot of that money has got washed out of the market and is going to get reset at some point. It will eventually come back down when money rotates back in. But whether that is the trigger before, tomorrow's a rising of CPI, probably not, or maybe the rate cut, who knows? It's probably going to be policy changes. That's going to be the big driver. But that being said, the altcoin market is still looking like this. It's still had its big old flash crash, and we've talked about it before. Normally, alt seasons and stuff like that in the past will, rally from a big event like that. But that event is pretty scary, realistically, when you think about it. Luckily, I wasn't holding any altcoins. By the way, if you are interested in some extra stuff and extra content, there's going to be some pretty interesting stuff getting posted on here. I've got a big announcement coming up in the next few days in terms of what new content and courses that are coming, because they're going to get put on there. So for me, and what am I doing? Not a lot. I'm waiting. I'm going to stack the sats, I think. I think it's important to note that things are going to be absolutely fine longer term with Bitcoin. I think even if we do drop, it's probably a good opportunity to buy. I think you will probably outperform the market. But that gold money, buying into gold right now, does not make sense at all, right? There's a better chance of making a lot more money buying Bitcoin, for example, than buying gold. If that rotation comes through, if we get a better CPI print, for example, than what we're expecting, it may well be a good bounce. If we get obviously a rate cut, which we are expecting, it may well be okay. But if the policy looks like, we may be changing next year, it might be very, very interesting where the money goes, because those institutions with CPI and, the Federal Reserve and obviously institutions buying with ETFs on Bitcoin, whatever, it's going to be a big, big factor of where money may well rotate into.